What do you do when you spend 5 years working double shifts, skipping vacations, eating lunch at your desk, living small and patient and disciplined, and then your 17-year-old brother sits across the dinner table and decides the result of all of it should be his 18th birthday present? I put my fork down. Tyler had been talking for weeks about what he wanted for his birthday. A car, money toward college, a laptop, normal things that cost normal amounts of money. Then he looked directly at me across my mother's pot roast and announced he had been doing some thinking and what he actually wanted was my house. Not help with a down payment someday, not a loan. My house. The one I had spent 5 years saving for, working doubles at the hospital until I had enough for. A down payment and closed 14 months ago. He said it like he was doing me a favor by finally making a decision. He used the word foundation. My 17-year-old brother, 6 days from his 18th birthday, used the word foundation about my house like he had rehearsed it in the car on the way over. I looked at my mother. She was looking at her plate. I looked at my father, Glenn. He cleared his throat and said Tyler had a point that I was in a solid position and could probably manage a transition without too much disruption to my life. Too much disruption. My father looked at me and suggested that losing my house would not be too much disruption to my life. The table went completely quiet except for someone's fork scraping ceramic and my own heartbeat. I said I was not giving anyone my house. Tyler said he was not asking me to give it forever, just as a starter situation while he got on his feet, and I could rent an apartment for a while. I said that was exactly what giving it meant. He said I was twisting his words. My mother said maybe. We should all talk about this calmly because everyone wanted what was best for the family. Pushed my chair back and stood at the kitchen sink staring at the backyard, trying to slow my breathing down. I drove home that night and sat in my own driveway for a long time looking at the front of my house. The porch light I had spent 40 minutes picking out at the hardware store. The flower bed I had planted in March from seeds that had finally started to look like something real. The front door I had painted myself on a September Saturday with music on and nowhere to be. 14 months of waking up in a place that was mine. That existed because of every choice I had made in my 20s. Every no to things I wanted so I could have the thing I needed most. And my brother had sat across the dinner table and decided it should be his. Tyler texted me the next morning, not an apology. He said he understood I had a strong reaction, and he wanted me to sit with the idea for a few days before I made a final decision. He used the phrase, "get used to them," about me losing my house. The text kept coming throughout the week. A link to an article about tax advantages of intra-family property transfers. A message explaining he had spoken to someone in real estate and the process was simpler than I probably thought. Then a floor plan of my house, with notes written on it. His bedroom marked out. A gaming setup sketched into what was currently my office. The guest room labeled for when his friends came to stay. He had sent me a layout of my own house with his furniture planned out. Then he sent a message saying he had consulted a real estate attorney who confirmed the transfer would be straightforward, if both parties were willing. I read that one sitting at my desk at work and had to put my phone in my drawer and keep it there for the rest of the shift. He was 17 years old, 6 days from turning 18, and he had called an attorney about transferring my house into his name. I called my mother from the parking lot after my shift. She went quiet in a way that told me immediately she already knew. She said they had not encouraged anything. Tyler had done this on his own initiative. But they had also had some family conversations, and my father felt that if there was a way to help Tyler launch his adult life without it costing anyone too much, they should explore that together. I asked what without it costing anyone too much meant when the thing being explored was my entire house. She said property was just property and family was what lasted. I told her I was not giving Tyler my house. Not the house, not a room, not a year-long arrangement, not a trial period, not a creative solution. The conversation was finished. She said she hoped I would continue to think about it because she felt there was still room for a generous solution. I said there was not, and I hung up. Tyler's birthday arrived. I sent a card with $200 inside because he was my brother and I loved him and I was not going to let this turn me into someone who stopped showing up for family. He did not acknowledge the card. My Uncle David called 2 days after the birthday party. He said Tyler was a good kid at a pivotal moment and family needed to rally around him. I asked when someone had rallied around me by giving me their house. He said that was different circumstances. He said I was being unnecessarily difficult. I said I was being a homeowner. He hung up. My cousin Brianna sent me a voice note on Instagram. A full minute and 40 seconds of warm, gentle words about what it meant to be there for a sibling during a formative time, and how giving Tyler a real start would create a bond that lasted forever. She said it in a soft, breathy tone like she was recording a wellness podcast about my property. It was the voice note that made me understand something I had been missing. Tyler had used his birthday party to tell people I was giving him the house. Not that he had asked, that it was happening. He had framed it as settled in front of an audience so that my refusal would look like backing out of something I had already agreed to. My Aunt Renee called to thank me for being such a generous sister to Tyler. I said I was not sure what she was thanking me for. She said Tyler had mentioned at the party that I was working out the transfer details. I said Tyler had mentioned incorrectly. I sat on my couch after that call and stared at the wall. My brother had stood in a room full of family members and told them my house was as good as his. He had presented it as a done deal in front of witnesses so that walking away made me the one breaking a promise. I called a family law attorney named Paula the next morning. She told me no one could compel me to transfer property. She said Tyler had no legal claim and no mechanism for creating one. She said the more immediate concern was that Tyler had apparently misrepresented the situation to family members, and the pattern of behavior I was describing was worth documenting carefully. She told me to screenshot every text, save every voicemail, write down every conversation with dates and times. I spent 2 hours that evening screenshotting everything. My father called that Friday and proposed a compromise. He said, what if Tyler moved into my house and paid nominal rent while he saved money, and I rented somewhere nearby for a year until he was stable? I pressed the phone to my ear and made sure I was following what my father was actually proposing. He wanted me to move out of my own house, go rent an apartment, and let my 18-year-old brother live in it indefinitely. I asked my father if he was listening to himself. He said families made sacrifices for each other. I said I had already made sacrifices, 5 years of them, and that was the house. He said this would just be one more. I said no. I told him I loved him and needed him to stop calling me about this. He said he could not promise that. I said then I could not. Promised to keep picking up, and I hung up. My best friend Kezia came to my house on a Saturday. We sat in the garden with coffee, and she looked around at the flower bed and the whole yard and said, this is a really good house. I said I know. She said it is yours. I said I know. She said she wanted to make sure I actually knew because there was a version of this where they wore me down slowly. Every call and every guilt trip stacking up until one day I did something I would spend a decade regretting. I told her I was not going to be worn down. She held up her coffee mug, and we sat in the October light, and I felt for the first time in weeks the certainty that this was mine, and it was not going anywhere. Tyler showed up at my house on a Wednesday evening without calling. I let him in, because he was my brother. And I was not going to have this conversation in a doorway. He came inside and looked around. Not assessing, just looking. He said it was a really good house. I said I know. He apologized for how he had brought it up at the dinner table. And then he said something that made me sit down. He said my mother had told him to mention the house transfer to family members at the party. That she had suggested framing it as in progress because she thought if the family was already excited and supportive, it would help move things along on my end. She had coached him to tell everyone the transfer was happening because she believed social pressure would move me where direct conversation had not. I asked him to say that part about my mother again. He repeated it word for word. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I said I appreciated him coming to tell me the truth. I said I was not as angry at him as I would have been 2 weeks earlier because he was 18 and our mother had put him in the middle of something she had designed. He said he did not want the house. He said it simply, for the first time since this started without anything underneath it. He said he had wanted to feel like the family believed in him and he had taken a shortcut to try to get there, and the shortcut had been wrong and he knew it. I told him I believed in him. I told him I believed in him enough to refuse to give him something he had not earned, because handing it over would have told him for the rest of his life that things came to you when you made enough noise at the right dinner table. He said that was kind of brutal. I said I knew and I meant every word. I called Paula the moment he left and told her everything. Then I called my mother. I told her I needed her to personally contact every single person she had spoken to at that party and correct the record directly. Not let it fade. Not hope people forgot. Call them. Tell them she had given them incorrect information. Tell them the transfer was not happening. Every one of them. Because I was not going to spend the next 6 months being thanked for generosity I had not offered or guilt-tripped for backing out of a promise I had never made. She said making those calls would be embarrassing. I said yes, it would be. She said, could we not just allow things to settle naturally? I said no. She had created the misrepresentation, and she was going to correct it directly and explicitly. She said she would see what she could do. I told her that was not acceptable, and I needed to know it would be handled before I came to another family dinner. She made the calls. David called with a different tone, less authority, more careful around the edges. He said he understood there had been a miscommunication, and he wanted me to know he felt he had overstepped. That word from David, who had never in my memory acknowledged overstepping anything. Brianna texted, no wellness podcast energy this time, just a plain message saying she had gotten the wrong information and hoped I was okay. Aunt Renee called to apologize for the thank you call. The family network corrected itself one conversation at a time. My father came to see me alone the following week. He said he owed me an apology with no conditions attached. He said he had watched me save for 5 years, and he should have ended the dinner table conversation the moment Tyler said it, instead of looking for a middle ground that was not his to find. I said it should have been said the night it happened. He said yes, it should have been. Then he asked which wall I was thinking of painting next. I said the dining room, dark green. He nodded and said that would look really good. We sat and talked about the house and the garden, and it was the most normal conversation we had shared in 2 months, and I held on to every minute of it. My mother and I met for coffee 10 days later. She told me she had spent a lot of Tyler's life worrying about him quietly, that I was 7 years older and more independent and had never needed things spelled out, and she had always felt Tyler had gotten less of her attention because of that. She said when the house idea came up, she had seen it as a way to give him something concrete, to level something that had always felt uneven in her mothering, and she had grabbed it without thinking clearly about what she was actually doing. I said I understood the feeling behind it. I also told her that correcting an imbalance in her parenting was not something she could do with my resources without asking me first. She nodded. She said she had known that and had done it anyway and was not proud of it. She apologized. The real kind, the kind that does not rush you to accept it. I told her I accepted it and I meant it. Tyler moved into a room share in January. He texted me a photo on moving day. Small room, window facing a parking structure, a poster on the wall, a lamp sitting on a cardboard box being used as a side table. He was grinning when he sent it. I said it looks great. He sent back a thumbs up and then a second text a minute later that just said thank you. I knew what he was thanking me for, and it had nothing to do with the photo. I painted my office the same weekend. Deep blue, 2 coats, Saturday afternoon, music on, no particular schedule, nobody needing anything from me. I stood in the doorway when I finished and looked at the walls. My brother had sat across a dinner table and decided the result of 5 years of my life should be his 18th birthday present. My mother had decided the family's sense of fairness was worth more than my right to the thing I had built. My uncle had arrived with speeches about what family owed each other as though that obligation only ever moved in one direction. None of it had touched any of this. Not 1 square foot of it. I had saved for 5 years, said no to things I wanted so I could have the thing I needed, lived small and patient and consistent until I could do the thing I was trying to do. Nobody handed me the foundation Tyler wanted, handed to him. I built it the only way a foundation can actually be built, slowly without shortcuts by myself. And then I defended it when someone tried to take it, and it was still here. This is mine. Every wall, every room, every square foot of it, built by me and defended when it had to be. My brother has a room with a parking structure view and a lamp on a cardboard box and something to call his own for the first time, and I think somewhere in the space between the dinner table and moving day, he finally understood what that actually means. You cannot hand someone a foundation. You can only build your own. That is the whole story. That is everything.